Welcome to the SJ Child Show, where a little bit of knowledge can turn fear into understanding. Enjoy the show. Hi, and welcome to the SG Child Show. I'm really excited today to introduce you to Dr. Travis Arrington. Is it Arrington or Arrington?
Arrington, yeah.
Okay, Arrington. Those last names. My guest, Travis. So glad to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be on the show.
Yeah, and you are here in my town, and so that's even more exciting that we can connect like this and hopefully in person someday then maybe too.
Yeah, definitely.
So it'd be great. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction and what brought you here today.
Yeah. So I'm a chiropractor by trade. It was kind of a second career for me, and went back to school and decided to figure out some things I didn't like about chiropractic. And along that journey and my own personal stuff, found a lot of support with mental health. I dealt with an addiction in the past and found some neurological principles and a whole program that helped me kind of overcome that with chiropractic and some other neurology things. And then through more of that, I found a whole piece on neurodevelopmental and realized gaps that I had in my own development and decided to jump into that training. And so that was kind of the introduction of like shifting from like the normal neck pain, back pain model to like more of a brain-based, hey, this is a bigger piece of brain development that we can actually help with, looking at the nervous system. So I focus a lot on that. We see all sorts of cases in the office. And then my wife is a marriage and family therapist who works in the office with us. And so for people that are, oftentimes a lot of our patients see both of us, which is amazing because then they can kind of process consciously, mentally what's going on and then see me and do more of the neurological deeper stuff. And when they do it together, like the results are incredible. So,
I can imagine. Absolutely. And I love that you guys work together. Number one, that's fantastic. And my husband and I would work together if I could get him on screen to do a podcast, but he hasn't ponied up to that one yet. This is going to get to him, right? No, but it's really great to be able to have that relationship where that you're helping others, and it's so rewarding when you can especially help families who might be confused or stuck and kind of feel like they sometimes feel hopeless, and it's really hard to help nurture and make them feel safe in those kinds of settings. So it's really great that we have service providers like you to be able to gain some tools from to help.
Yeah. There's definitely a gap, and I realize that there's an interesting kind of play where we're relatively new office in Utah. We had our company White Bison Wellbeing. We operated it in South Carolina for a time and then decided to move here to Utah to be closer to family and have our daughter be raised close to her cousins and things like that. So, but that connection of like getting into that community and helping people understand the difference that we can make. There's definitely a need, but then bridging that gap with education has been what we're discovering. So,
yeah. And it is a big one too. There is a big gap. And even in, podcasting, I'm trying to get it all out there and seize as many audiences as I can. But there's always more to learn. There's always new things to teach and to share. And we're just always hopefully growing and gaining connections along the way and sharing experiences, because it's so important that we can gain so much knowledge from other people's experiences. And then, sometimes either in good and bad, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, it's so nice to have you here today. Tell us what kind of a day might look like for you in your clinic.
So it varies honestly from day to day. Typically I'm seeing people adjusting people, on the tables. We have kind of an open adjusting area where people come in, they get adjusted, and we do scheduled appointments like that. I have set apart times for new patients. And so we'll do an exam process where we look at, structure of the person, if there's anything interfering between the communication between the brain and the body, which we determine with some neurological scans. We use surface EMG, which is basically looking at like muscle tone, inflammation, and then their ability to adapt to stress through HRV. And then on top of that, we do some brain-based games of like where they're at in development, what tools they're using. And so for a new patient, we establish that baseline of like, here's the tools that this person is using to engage, interact with their environment. When we see that there's areas that they're not there yet, then we know that, number one, we track it over time of like, okay, let's introduce some treatment. And then at a certain point in time, we introduce some home-based programs, games and exercises it's a program called Brain Blossom, but it's neurodeflective retraining. Basically go back and help them pick up those tools to interact with their environment. That could be primitive reflexes, it could be motor tools, sensory tools, visual cognition, like whichever ones it is that they need. But we start in a specific order, respect the brain's hierarchy. The nice thing is, like I said, it's done from home, so the time demand is low, and then they're usually working with a parent or caregiver to develop that relationship. And also, once they pick up those tools, the amazing thing is you don't lose them. Children and adults that are struggling with anxiety or neurodivergent behaviors, like once you pick up that tool, the brain's incredible. Like unless there's a traumatic brain injury in the future, if you don't lose those tools again. And so it's really like changing the trajectory of people's lives once, they get in a place where they can, pick up more tools and then have more tools to engage with their environment. So
I love that you said that. And I had just recently, last year, in fact, went and had a QEEG done. And in that, they did reflective testing. And, I never had done, it was at the clinic. And so it was like an hour's worth of all of these different reflexes that you take for granted, if you will, since birth, right? And you don't understand or realize that all of these types of reflexes in your body have a neurological, what's what we're looking for, I guess, representation in how your body reacts and things like that. And it was fascinating, really, to go through that process. So it's very interesting, I say the least.
Yeah, no, it is. Like sometimes, even for myself, like when I got introduced to the program and I started doing some of the exercises, and then you're like, oh, why is this hard? Like, why are my arms like doing this weird thing? And then you're like, and then with time, but also like it goes away, like what we call like it integrates. And then it's like, oh, so it just lays like more of a foundation of like why children and adults get overwhelmed in a classroom, or why we have lots of anxiety, or why there's certain behaviors there. Like one thing that we say a lot in our clinic is behavior is a window to the brain. There's no purposeless behaviors and there's no bad kids. There's just a reason that they're struggling to communicate or interact in an environment. And if we can lower demand and then help them, help come on to their level, then it starts to make sense. But, for people that are neurotypical or, less on the spectrum, then it's sometimes just like, well, why are they doing that? And our logical brain gets in the way of really seeing what's actually going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's something I say all the time too, is all behavior is communication, and understanding that communication and those children's processes to adapt that communication to their needs is where they need support. And it's not in the punishments we can find or the grounding we can do, but in the listening, and not only with our ears, but with our eyes, like really seeing and listening and being active listeners in our children's lives to discover what they're really trying to communicate. Because unlike us who have our developed brains, we're working with people with undeveloped brains. And in that, we don't have the I guess, man, can't talk very good today. They don't have the ability to just, make these decisions or have, better impulse control, all of those things. And so what types of tools do you think you give a family? Let's say somebody has a child with ADHD and they're really struggling to help their child focus. What types of access to tools or resources do you provide for them?
Yeah. So what we do is we start with this paradigm of what we call the triangle of simplicity, where we know that the brain isn't fully developed at birth. The brain moves through a trajectory of development as we grow. And through that trajectory, that stress impacts that growth, right? And so when stress impacts that growth, we develop adaptations to that stress. And that could be physical stressors, chemical stressors, emotional stressors, whichever, doesn't really matter which one. They're all going to affect our physiology, like our nervous system, the same. And when the body gets stuck in like too much demand or too much input, too much stress, then what happens is like on like a cellular level, like our body actually switches into a sympathetic state, or what we call like a stress state. And like the example of understanding this like initial paradigm, it helps kind of the building blocks, right? It's the foundation of like, okay, this is why. So if your child is stuck, or you as an individual are stuck in this stressed physiological state, and then someone comes to you and says, hey, Sarah, can you go ahead and we're going to teach you how to have good manners at restaurants. I want you to sit still, put your hands in your lap, and speak to the waiter kindly when he comes. And you're in this like elevated stress state where you're just like, and it's like, more than likely, like you're not going to be able to do that, right? It's like you don't have what we call like top-down control. Like you're down here lower, like in your emotional brainstem, because you don't have those tools. And so then it's like, well, what's going on? It's like, well, you're stuck in this stress state. It's taking you out of like using your higher level tools, dropped you down in your brain to your brainstem area, where all of a sudden you're just like reacting to everything, right? And it's like, why is my child like always so active, bouncing off the walls, crashing into things, like picking at himself, like yelling and fighting and hitting? It's like, well, there's so much chaos going on there. That's like, number one, we just got to shift the physiology. So the tool that we use is initially chiropractic. So we use tonal chiropractic. It's different than I think I'm the third in the state, and with the specialties that I have, the only one in the state of Utah that offers this specific type of chiropractic. But it's done worldwide. There's 80 something in the United States, and then there's some in Australia and Europe that practice this style with this neurodevelopmental lens. And so we're really just like looking at it from a tension on the brain and spinal cord, lowering that tension, shifting that physiologically into a more of a parasympathetic or rest and digest. When you're there, then they're more at ease. Then it's like, well, then when you ask them to do something, they're not only like visually are they at ease, but like under the surface, like their physiology, their cellular state is actually in a place to learn and grow. The body can't be in growth mode and survival mode at the same time. And so when we switch them from that survival mode, that stress state, into a growth mode, then also now it's ready to be like, okay, let's introduce more tools. And even just doing that, to be honest, Sarah, is you'll see lots of things go away. Like we've done that initial period of care with children, and also the Tourette's go away. And it's like, well, what happened? And it's like, there was so much demand on their musculoskeletal system. Sorry, I get emotional about some of these things because like it changes these kids' lives. Yeah. That like it goes away, and then we're like, okay, now let's introduce the tools where they can start picking up even more tools to engage in with their environment. And it's like, wow, it's like this kid that's getting picked on and bullied, and like the parents are like, I don't know what's going on. Then all of a sudden they start chiropractic, which the parents are like, it's just neck pain, back pain. And then the Tourette's go away, and the bedwetting goes away, and the bouncing off the wall behavior goes away, and the yelling goes away. And then all of a sudden at that 3-month mark, it's like, okay, now we're going to introduce more tools at home to go and pick up additional, primitive reflexes, sensory, motor, movements, all these things in a specific way. And they just get better. We see 80 to 90% improvement with just those 2 interventions alone. And we've got 5, but those are the 2 big ones that it's like, hey, like you can see change. So
that's fantastic. I mean, just thank you to you for providing those to those families. And it also goes to show the amount of education and level of respect that you're showing for the parents and for the families, because as you absolutely know, it's not just about the child. In most cases, it really has to be family wide in the acceptance and the learning process and in the perception of how we can best serve this individual, and not show up with, guilt, shame, judgment, any of those things, but really show up with the intent to love and nurture and foster and create a good path of good tool belts for, these kiddos to have to take with them into these situations. Because not only then are they going to be able to have success in their home and their family life, and success doesn't mean not having any bad days. That's so not what it means. It just means that you are generally overall, and I'm sure that it's measurable, being seeing the differences and seeing the ease and the ease of stress in your home life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. There's several points of feedback that we look at, but that's definitely one of like how are they performing in school? If they have learning challenges, if they even have reading challenges, well, a reading challenge can oftentimes be problems with like their visual field. That's one of the things that we take into account of like, hey, we can help your tracking and gaze, and like we do that in our exam of like, are their eyes able to fixate, follow, and saccade, and all these different things, and it's like. And if reading is a challenge, it's like maybe they're having a hard time like coordinating like their eye movements. And if it is, then it's like, well, yeah, like it would be hard. It's like a simple example is like, well, if I asked you to pound in a 4-inch nail into the wall, and I gave you a little plastic hammer, and I said, okay, go pound that nail into the wall, you'd be like, oh, that's like, it's really hard. I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to be like, dude, this is taking forever. Like, I can't do it. I'm going to start complaining. And like, it's like, that's like what you're asking your kid to do, or that's what you're going through life doing. And if I gave you like a big framing hammer with a waffle head on it, and you went boom, like in one strike, it's in the wall. And it's like, well, what's so hard? And it's like, well, mom, you've got the framing hammer. Your child's got this little tiny plastic dinky play hammer. And it's like, and there's a gap there. There's a difference of like the tools that you're using. And so helping the mom see that they're not a bad parent, that they didn't do something wrong in the raising of that child. It's like, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just reality of it is like, even another phrase is like, kids are wonderful observers, but terrible interpreters. It's like what they observe is great. They're observing, but the way they interpret things, like they can interpret a conversation or even something on TV as stressful. And also it's enough to switch them into a stress mode for a short period of time. And maybe on that journey of brain development, they miss a couple tools because also they're stuck in stress mode for a week or maybe a month or longer, and they don't pick up those developmental tools. And then they, hopefully they switch back out for whatever reason, and they start picking up tools again. It's like, well, why does Johnny have problems? Like, why is he different than my other kids? Like, what happened? And it's like, well, there's lots of factors that play into that, of which we can get into if you want, but there's lots of genetic factors and, different things that get passed on of why one child's more susceptible than another. But
yeah. Oh my gosh. Believe me, after 3, I have a 23-year-old, 11, and a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Knowing that everybody can have their own unique individual personality is something I definitely have now and have respect for now too. I think that in my first round of parenting, I was coming in as a step parent. And I think with that lens, my intention was to do the best and to give her the best opportunities and to be the best provider in the space where she wasn't with her biological mom, to be the best I could be for her. And, in that, I didn't really learn about parenting. I just did what I thought was what parenting was supposed to be. Well, guess what? Today, I don't do anything like that anymore.
You didn't get the parenting manual?
Yes, right. I can write the manual. Here's what not to do. But I think it's so valuable sometimes to have that information and to be able to, take from that experience and to be able to lean into these two children who, are much different. And our son is semi-verbal. He's autistic, and he's just has an incredible photographic and auditory memory that we found out when he was very young, about 3. And, now today at 13, we're learning how to have conversations with people that are appropriate. We're learning how to, have our bathroom, time just more independent, things like that. Things that we would have been working on at maybe 3, but we're working on those skills now because that's where he's at now. And that's something that I think is so important for parents to really follow their children's needs, there's a way to follow and still guide, but not control and take with you, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I think it's hard because there's a lot of expectation, especially with like the way our schooling system's set up, is that like, oh, when you're in first grade, then you've got these milestones, and you're in second grade and you've got these milestones. And it's like age and grade does not determine like neurological readiness.
No.
Even for more neurotypical kids, it's like there's a lot of factors that go in there that it's like it can be very helpful for the development of that child to hold them back. And it's hard as a parent because there's a lot of outside pressure, and you're in parent groups, and it's like, oh, well, one kid was fine and this kid's not. I want to get them to, to the level. And it's like, it's not about that. It's like, it's about their readiness to be able to take, because as soon as they're ready, it's like, man, the human brain is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, it'll just like snap, it'll just like happen. And all you're like, whoa, like what happened? It's like, well, they were ready, it's like, but before they're ready and you're trying to force it, it's like, it's frustrating on both ends.
It really is. And, our family is very unique in that I've been lucky enough to be a stay-at-home mom and really put into action all of the things that I've learned over this, 13 years now on this journey with him, and really learn how to follow his lead to help what's best for him, because what's best for him doesn't look like what's best for the other children in my neighborhood. And I know that for sure now, and I knew that very early on. And it really, you have to come to a point, especially, with your spouse, or that you are going to do things that's best for your family. And it's hard sometimes when you have other generations that have a different understanding of what you're might be going through, a different idea, rather, not even understanding. That's the problem. And so, learning to educate gracefully the other people in your life, and learning to access resources and tools like Dr. Travis, that's the things that will help you find success in your family to really give your child the life that they deserve to live.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What is it? Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
It's a multifaceted approach. There's OT, and there's speech therapy, and there's ABA, and there's all these different things. And it's like, well, we don't claim to be the only provider that's going to fix all of your child's problems. Like, we don't really fix any. We're here to support, obviously, but like, there's definitely room and place for like these other professionals. And what we have found in our own office and with other providers, chiropractors who do the same protocol that I do, is like, any of these other services are actually enhanced when we introduce the chiropractic piece, because it's like they actually work better and faster and get more result out of it. Because again, it's going back, it's like, if we can shift their physiology into that rest and recover, ready to learn, that growth mode, then also it's like, well, wow, OT also, they were just kind of like hovering, and then it just went boom and it jumped. And it was like, yeah, they were under 2 weeks of chiropractic care, and then you look at the time difference, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, we got them ready to take on those tools. So
I love that. what would you do if maybe a family came to you with a really young child and they were questioning, kind of if the child, could be helped? How would you guide them through that process? I probably in your testing and things like that, they would discover what they need.
Like how young are we talking? When you say
How young do you do? That's a great question to ask, I guess.
Depending on for what they're looking support for. So like we see infants in the office, and so we can start there. Obviously, some of those behavioral challenges are not going to be as apparent, or it's kind of but again, the same principle applies. Is that the birth process is a stressful experience, regardless of how you're born, whether it's C-section or traditional or whatever, like it's a stressful experience on the baby and on the mom. And so like making sure that the communication of that baby, the communication is clear between the brain and the body, like that's the first step of like, okay, let's set them up for success, that they're in the growth state, right? And then they're going to have the best chance of picking up the most developmental tools. So after they get, usually with like the neurodeflective retraining, the brain blossom program, at that point, it could be 3. There's going to be some limitations because their brain's not to the point to develop all those tools. Because again, trajectory, but we've got 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds on the program, and it's great. So
fantastic. When you send them home, and kind of what do you give to the parents? Are there like handouts, or do you have like a website you send them to? What type of resources do you send when you send them home?
Like after
your appointments and things like that, because it's so important that people implement anything that they learn. Hopefully they're implementing things in their home as well, to a point, obviously, that they can.
Right. So we recommend, I make a fair amount of social media content. It's on different subjects. I go through waves of focusing more on neurodevelopmental stuff and then other chiropractic pieces. So that's helpful. We do offer a workshop for free in the office, typically every other month, so they can come to that workshop, and even as a refresher, because there's going to be different things you pick up on and different things that I say depending on night. And then The Whole Brain Child is a book that we recommend to most parents. If they haven't read that, that's one that we definitely recommend that they read kids, just to get that perspective.
I love that. The Whole Brain Child. Definitely.
Heard of that one?
No, I'm interested about that.
Yeah. That's follows a lot of I guess the parenting style that we recommend. There's a workbook that goes with it, and so you can just kind of helps as an at-home support. Again, it's a lot of these things we obviously provide awareness in the office of what's going on. If people come to us with different things, and we can talk through like, here's a right now strategy to deal with XYZ. But as far as like, tools when they go home, we're in the process of making a few things. That's great. We've got a workbook that's in the pipeline that we're working on to be able to send home for moms too. Because the reality of it is, it's like, we talk about the kids, and it's like, well, don't forget about mom and dad. And usually mom takes on the stress of the whole family. And like, if she gets the scan done, there's a lot of times the mom scan is worse than the kids.
Yeah, I believe that.
Like, seriously, I'm usually not too surprised at this point, where I'm like, yeah, like your kid's scan is bad and your scan's going to be twice as bad. It's like, and you're holding it all together, but like, let's not forget about the anxiety that you're dealing with and all of the other, like you said, the shame and the guilt of like everything that's built on. And it's like your system's running hot too. Like, you're in this survival mode. And then the way, like the energy of the home, like it gets picked up, it's like we've got a handful of families that their whole family's under care. And like, it's better when everyone's like shifting from that to like, oh, everyone's shifting into more like a more relaxed state to be able to handle more stressors. So
I love that. And I haven't been to see you personally or my family, but in saying that, just kind of a parallel thinking that when we all found out that we were on the spectrum, I was the last one to find out last May in that QEEG. When we all found that all of these things out, it felt like it relieved stress in our family. It felt like it gave us a different perspective to be able to see one another for maybe a little bit more like, who we felt we were inside. And I was able to then kind of see the habits that this husband I've loved for 20 years now, has, that may have driven me crazy a few times, but that my son has those same habits. And now I'm like, okay, well, that can be accommodated and that can be considered. And it's really just made our family, I feel, stress free. And it's not to say we don't have challenges, and our kids are obviously preteens and teens. So we're going to have those days that are not going to be fun. But for the most part, we don't have like stress in our home. And I remember what it was like to have stress in my home every day, and communication that consisted of yelling. And, it's like, I've never been so less anxious in my life than I have in like maybe the last 5 years, when I've let go of all of the expectations that my parents or my neighbors or my kids' teachers at school or anybody else, I've let go of all of those things and decided that the success in my family happens in the walls of my home. Yep. And that's where the acceptance needs to be. And so since that has happened, I mean, like, we have crazy sleep schedules. It's okay. Everybody is healthy and happy, and no one's ever in trouble or fighting or yelling. And it's just like, I don't know, it's very successful.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. It definitely takes time to like get to that point.
Yeah.
Most people don't have the awareness for a while, that it takes to understand your own stuff and then be accepting of other people's stuff. Like, that takes a lot of self-awareness, for sure.
It does. And I think that you're really helping people to start that journey to have a different perspective and to view their what they may see as challenges as really just a part of the way life is. And here's how we see the positive side of that. Here's how we enhance these things, these qualities, and decrease the stress. So thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Tell us where we can go and find you so we can support all of this good business.
So website's probably the easiest. So it's whitebisonwellbeing.com. Is our website, and you have all of our information on there. Like I said, we're in Sandy, Utah, so we're just off of 13th East, south side of Fort Union, so off of the 215 Belt Route. So if you guys are in Utah, then
and that's a unique name. Tell me, you got to have a story behind that.
There is a story. So bison is America's national mammal. Some people don't know that, but so it's kind of a patriotic piece. But instinctually, bison, when a storm comes into like the plains, cows will turn and run or huddle up and stay stuck, and bison will actually charge into the storm. They have this instinct that they'll see a storm coming and they'll literally just like band together and charge into the storm. And the reason why they do that is by like running into it, they actually get through the storm faster to like grass and pastures and things like that. And so that's kind of the metaphor that we use of like, face your storm, move through the hard things, because everybody has them. Move through the hard things in your life and then find the abundance and goodness on the other side. So
bravo. I love that. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad I asked. I'm so glad. No, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And that's great advice for all of us.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. We've got a 20-foot by 50-foot mural in our office that kind of depicts that whole scene that my wife painted. So it's
I'm definitely going to be stopping by, if not to just see the art piece. Fantastic. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you today. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for what you're doing to help families.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will definitely be in touch.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you, Sarah.